right, everybody, welcome to Sam and Scott are watching Watchmen. If you're joining us today for the first time, this is part 2 of a multi-part series designed to help introduce and discuss the source material for the HBO show Watchmen. If you are unfamiliar with the story, or like to start your stories from the beginning of the story, you may want to see our episode on issue 1.
All right, so what's going on, Scott?
Hey, Sam, what's up? I'm ready to talk about the greatest superhero story ever told, and that is Watchmen.
Oh, man, it's so exciting to be here to talk about that. As Scott said, we are on the second issue. So if you're following along each episode of this podcast series, we're going to go into each issue. And for newbies, it should be a really good primer, a really good follow along for you to get a really to answer your questions and really get in depth to understand some of the concepts and themes that are involved in these issues.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So what we want to do is we want to get you familiar with the source material, because we've been told, we have it on good authority, we're insiders, that this is going to be a sequel to the original comic.
All right.
So we feel like you may want some of the context of what's going on and what's happened, or maybe you just feel lazy and you don't want to actually read the comic, you want to listen to us instead. I think the comic's pretty good. You should read it.
Awesome. You
can do both.
All right. So to get a little bit of house cleaning out the way, you definitely want to reach us at Twitter, at Nerdcyclopedia, and also for the podcast at Watchmen Podcast. That's with a 1 at the end.
That's right. So that Twitter handle is Watchmen Podcasts 1. There's no T, and they said it was going to be like an extra $20 for the T. I said, no way. Can't afford that. We're going to put the money right into the production, giving the people what they want, which is more podcasting.
And that's spelled out WATCHMENPODCAS 1. All right?
Yeah.
Also email us at watchingwatchmen@Nerdcyclopedia. Also, you'll see all our links and everything right on our website at nerdcyclopedia.com. So don't hesitate to go there. If you don't like anything that we say, you could always hashtag us too. I'm at Hate Sam,
and I'm at Hate Scott. So if you don't like something we have to say, you disagree, you got a correction, something like that, feel free to email us like Sam said. We'd love to hear from you. We love to hear from our nerd psychos. That's what we're calling our fans.
All right. All you nerd psychos out there.
All 3 of you.
We love we love you.
We love our nerd psychos.
Like Scott said, all 3 of you.
So before we jump into the second issue, I wanted to kind of one thing I'm doing kind of as part of this to make sure that what we're providing, the new person, the new reader, is a good recap, and we're on the same page. As I'm actually having my my wife read through this comic book for the first time, and I wanted to share some of her impressions, because I think obviously the first time I read this, I was a teenage boy, so my my general worldview is going to be a little different than hers.
Right.
So she said she had a lot to say about Rorschach, actually. She thought Rorschach. She was like, "What's Rorschach's problem?" Because she said he's really judgmental. But she can tell he was really smart because he figured out where the comedian's stash was in like 3 seconds. Which we talked about those panels. She also is hoping that Hollis Mason's book makes an appearance later in the story, and she's really excited to read that. So I told her that she can look forward to that. I spoiled that a little bit.
All right.
So
try not to spoil too much. I mean, we want her to get into the meat and potatoes of it.
Yeah. We just don't want anyone confused when they start, and Jeremy Irons is suddenly someone, you're like, who's that guy? They don't want that happening. So definitely, if you're listening to us now, you found us somewhere. We're on iTunes. I know you can get us on our website as well, right, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is, again, nerdcyclopedia.com. So come on, join the Nerd Psychos, and feel free to listen to our content. Without further ado, I think it's time that we begin episode 2 or chapter 2.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into this.
We are calling it "I'm the Kind of Guy Who Laughs at a Funeral." Okay, so the main action of chapter 2 takes place at the funeral of the comedian. So the comedian, still dead. Still very dead. So the funeral starts, and we kind of see a graveyard, but then immediately we're taken to California, because John has teleported Silk Spectre 2 to go visit Silk Spectre 1.
All right, her mom. White hair.
That's right. That's right. White-haired Silk Spectre. So Sally and Laurie are together. And, Laurie's kind of... Laurie Jupiter is kind of having a... Or Giuseppe. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call him 1 and 2, man. I don't want to... I get tongue-tied. So Silk Spectre 2 is kind of dealing with her mother, who's sort of portrayed as a touch difficult and demanding, I think is maybe the way I would say it, right? She's a very domineering person. And, Silk Spectre sort of is nostalgic for the old days, right?
Right.
She is. She has this nostalgia for the late 30s, early 40s when she was this super, she was like this pop culture icon,
Yeah, she was a sex magnet,
Oh yeah, she was a sex symbol.
Yeah, she was a sex symbol, and really got a lot of what I want to say here, a lot of give me the right word there, Scott.
Attention?
A lot of attention.
Yeah. And then she shows her daughter a Tijuana Bible, some fan center. You know what I mean? It's about her. And a Tijuana Bible, as described, is a short pornographic magazine.
Oh man!
So that's an interesting thing to share with a grown daughter.
And that's really super hilarious though, because if you look back in the 50s and 60s, at least back then, they did do like a lot of those crazy cartoons and stuff, and she had a lot of fans because of her being a costume adventurer and then a superhero. Well, costume adventurer as they call it in the books. So of course you're going to have your fans. And it really really touches on like the down to earthness of like this universe and everything, that you have this you have this notoriety and everything, and you have people actually wanting to send you porno books, stuff, because they just idolize you so much.
Yep. They said, I think what is Silk Spectre 2 says, is that the dude that wanted your costume? Sent you the Tijuana Bible. So like, there's like sort of a niche sort of collector-y kind of scene growing up around these guys. Which you see actually, because remember last episode we talked about Adrian Veidt and we talked about his line of superhero action figures, right? And how they were immensely popular. So there is some sort of residual like memory of these mass adventurers being, there's a certain segment of the population that likes them still.
Yeah, and she's sort of like reminiscing and everything. Laurie, she's really, finds it offensive, but her mom being as old as she is, she's just thinking back on all the good times. She doesn't want to remember she really doesn't want to remember like the bad parts of what she was doing, because that was a time and period in her life that she really treasured, and she's trying to really get over to Laurie. Well, you may think that things were like bad back then, and just doing it was just idiotic as far as costume adventuring. But to her mom, she feels that it was like a great time in her life. And that's just something that is just trying to get across to Laurie, especially with those books, because it's basically just saying that it was a good time to remember. I had some fans and everything, and this is how I felt. And she was flattered by that. Right.
She liked she enjoyed the attention because it was on her terms, because she presented herself as a Silk Spectre, so she feels empowered by it. Her daughter disagrees, right. Sees it as something else. So it's a generational schism. One of them, right? There's a couple of those in this book. We are, there's some intercuts of I'm gonna talk about the action at the actual funeral a little separately, okay? Because this issue is a little bit like memories of the comedian. That's kind of how it is. That's how it's presented to me, right? And these are how the individual characters recount their experiences of the comedian.
Right.
So I want to say that the only thing I'll say is there's a touch of unreliable narration here. Just a touch. And, Silk Spectre says, I'm 65. Every day the future looks a little bit darker. And the past, even the grimy parts of it, well, it just keeps on getting brighter all the time. And then the comic cuts away, and it cuts away to October something in 1940 where there's a Minutemen, there's a picture of the Minutemen being taken.
Yeah, and you see this picture it was in a comedian, the comedian's locker, or where he had hit his thing. And also you notice the same picture in Hollis Mason's house. This is a picture that just keeps on, reoccurring and everything, because the Minutemen was very important to these people. And yeah, go ahead.
So So it's really neat, like you were saying about that picture. I think of the things from, and this is an aside, of the things from the Watchmen movie that they got right, I think the thing they got most right is this picture. So if you Google it, you can see it. It actually they did a really good job putting it together. So I do want to, I have opinions about that movie. If you listen to the Nerdcyclopedia main cast, the episode W, you hear them. I mean, I'm pretty upfront about that.
Believe me, we're going to cover it again. So
yeah, for sure.
if you didn't catch it during our we did the W's and included Watchmen, but we'll go a little bit more in depth once we get to that portion during this series of podcasts.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just wanted to express my approval of that one particular aspect of the production.
Exactly. They got one thing right. Zach.
Start counting, Zach. We're gonna be on one for a bit.
But one thing I did want to also mention too. It also goes to show that her point was she's getting older. So, as grounded as this universe is, she's remembering stuff. She's just remembering things, the good old times and everything. Because as you get older, you start valuing things. You start valuing physical things a lot less, maybe, and memories, become a little bit more, valuable, for you. So in her mind, and Lori, it's going to take Lori, a while to appreciate, but she, eventually she will. Her mom's perspective as far as going through the costume adventuring, and we'll see that, and we'll see that manifest itself throughout the whole graphic novel.
Yes. So what happens at this and what's interesting about this picture, right, is what's about to happen in this book is something that is touched on in universe a lot. It's something everyone knows about, and it's because Hollis Mason wrote that Under the Hood book, and this is one of the things he says in the book.
Right.
So there's knowledge, essentially. Everybody involved with superheroes bought this book, right? And I don't know how good of a seller it was outside of that community, but everyone sort of knows this event happened, And what happens is the comedian attempts, there's no way to sugarcoat it. He attempts to rape Silk Spectre, right? I mean, it's pretty stunningly presented here as what he's doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they all got together to take the picture, and then, as they're just dispensing the meeting and everything, comedian decides he wants to get a little bit more of of Sally. You got that?
I lost you there for a second.
Okay, I'm sorry. The comedian decides he wants to get a little bit more of Sally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just no good. So Sally resists, and the comedian is able to overpower her. And then when he's, before he's able to complete the assault, the Hooded Justice comes in and stops it and beats him up a little bit. And then the comedian says, this is what gets you hot. This is what you like. And Hooded Justice is just sort of disarmed by that and kind of lets him go.
And keep in mind, people, this is, while it's not, visually graphic and everything, I mean, as visually, as you're imagining when these, as far as how they got the 9-panel structure, the different events that go into, her almost getting raped and everything. I mean, there's blood coming out of her mouth. He smacks her. I mean, this is like, this is like, man on woman violence and everything, which is for
in a
superhero comic. Exactly. It wasn't something known to be done, back then. So when we're going to keep on harping on Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons and John Higgins, just bringing superheroes to like the 20 into like the adult ranges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they let these characters grow up. They're not stuck in a time loop like in The Honeymooners with The Simpsons, These characters experience a life. They have consequences and actions, and time affects them. They get ground down by
right.
age.
And they have pleasures and needs and everything. And, comedian, he wanted, he because of who he was and his makeup and personality and everything, I guess he felt that he needed to dominate, Sally in a way that he did in order to go that route. Because you got a room full of costume adventurers already. And he just felt that he can actually get away with that. And like Scott said, Hooded Justice comes in and stops him and just pretty much kicks his ass.
Yep. Yep. He just beats him up real good. I mean, it's harrowing.
Yeah.
And it's not a situation where there's any sort of like misinterpretation or, it's just I mean, a comedian, obviously, and I'll say this because we're going to talk a little bit about the coda of this chapter is an installment of Under the Hood. So it's this actual Hollis Mason saying what happened here in this scene. Mm-hmm. And he says the comedian is the worst worm of them all, is what he kind of describes him as. So he does not like the comedian because of this, and they kick him out of the Minutemen.
Right.
So the comedian's outfit is something I want to just touch on here. I know, obviously the subject matter is super serious, but we're talking about timelines and other, this is sort of a thing inside of a little doll inside of a bigger doll.
Right.
And I want to look at his costume here. He's wearing yellow and purple, and he's got like kind of a homemade sort of like happy like drama face. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the actor thing on his belt buckle. But his costume's pretty flimsy, and it's just like almost like they call it a boiler suit or a jumpsuit, pretty much.
Right.
And he doesn't have weapons. It's just he's just using his hands. Okay. So that's kind of the situation he's in. After Hooded Justice tells Silk Spectre to, for God's sake, cover yourself up, which doesn't seem like the type of nurturing response you would hope that a victim of something like that would get.
Right.
But then we cut back to Lori's reading the Tijuana Bible, and she says, "Oh, this is vile." Because the dude said, the guy in the Tijuana Bible says, "Oh, say, baby, this is tops," which that's just I've never heard that.
Well, I mean, it's funny how it's juxtaposed with her, with the flashback of her almost getting raped and everything, and then it cuts right back to this. And the way they structure it, it's just her, Sally, just remembering. And this is where Scott was talking about the reliable narrator, who's to indicate that if this is exactly what she was remembering, but because of the flashback, this is what we're to perceive that she's remembering what happened with her and the comedian, and then it cuts to this to the present where they're still looking at that book, where Lori is looking at the book.
Right. So she's kind of distracted, and after what. Lori says, how can you stand being degraded, mother? And she just, Sally's not paying attention to her. She's lost and she's thinking about this time, which she said was a nostalgic time for her. And it's a juxtaposition of, like she said, the past gets brighter all the time. And then you see the grimiest possible story that you would, probably be able to tell with these characters, So that's an interesting juxtaposition. And it speaks to how the older generation, the living heroes, are kind of they're looking at everything through rose-colored glasses, and this is underscored by the fact that the advertisement on the magazine that she's reading is for Beats Descent Nostalgia, which is an important branding for him. So there's this is the type, and this is the type of book and comic book where every single detail matters, like every single one
thing. You got to pay attention. So if you are reading and going along for the first time, don't worry if it's some things that you don't catch the first time around, because you're going to want to go through it again. And and that's our job that we feel on this podcast, is to let you know that there is a really fine attention to detail in this graphic novel.
Oh yeah, it's something that the more you look into it, it's like a it's one of those decorative boxes that lock. You know what I mean? The wood boxes, you slide them apart. The puzzle boxes. Right. It's just like that. So every time you peel, it's like an onion. Every time you peel the layer back, there's something else.
Gotta appreciate. Yeah. Yep.
So then I thought this was funny. Then Sally, she says, "Mother, why are you talking? Why are you you have this sleazeball image?" And then Sally says, like, "Well, at least I'm not sleeping with an H-bomb."
Ooh, that was a shot right there for her.
I know, right? And then you have Lori say, "John's not an H-bomb, mother." It cracks me up.
It's funny how too, Lori calls out Rorschach's judgments and everything, but yet and still she's talking to her mom and is pretty much being judgmental on her life too. So
I mean, the chauvinistic attitude towards women and towards, like, what I mean, the dismissive sort of misogynistic, anti-women, anti-women sexuality message that all these superheroes sort of have.
Right.
It's echoed in Sally. Like, Sally Jupiter has a piece of that with her, right?
Right.
And I mean everything from the things Rorschach says about women, including as my wife pointed out, talking about her cheating welfare, like as what did she say? Like that's any of his business.
Rorschach,
then,
Rorschach, boy.
And then the comedian obviously here is not going to be, obviously he does not respect women. And then of course, Hooded Justice saying, "Get up and for God's sakes cover yourself up." Like there's just this this is the attitude,
Yeah. It calls out to a time where, it wasn't a lot of respect for, like Scott said, in women in certain positions and everything. And I was actually watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel with my wife.
Great show.
Yeah, that's an excellent show.
We're not doing a podcast on that show now, but perhaps we will.
Possibly, but just just as an aside, it was just amazed me on the way they did treat women in that show back in the back in those time periods and everything. And that's if you're looking at a way on how far things have come along today, it really is a stark difference.
Absolutely,
and applies to this story as well.
Yes, and we're not there. We're not trying to be a woke cast today, but that's not the main thing we want to do. But we of course bring our own mores and viewpoints to this
pointing out differences and everything. I mean, differences are differences. So it's just it just really shows how excuse me, how things were back then.
I mean, it's also in my opinion an indictment of the culture surrounding superhero fandom.
Right. Exactly.
The chauvinistic and everybody always comments on only Silk Spectre's outfit, right? Everyone says, "Oh, that outfit's risque, it's risque," but she's almost wearing exactly as much clothing as everybody else. Everybody's in tights, like Hollis Mason's outfit. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's everything's form fitting. They're all essentially nude.
Yep.
They're all heroically nude and drawn as such with like paint on their bodies, and only Silk Spectre gets hassled about that.
Of
right?
course,
Everyone
because
else is just colorful.
She's a woman, and that's just the way it was, or the way it is.
So that's something else that I noticed.
It's a deconstruction. What they attempted to do was just deconstruction, and when we're talking about deconstruction, oh man, this is one of the it's just so many layers to point out.
Yeah, I mean I don't want to rabbit hole too much on all these plot points, but I mean, you can see how any one of these topics you can expand and add ad infinitum.
Exactly.
And that's the sign of a carefully constructed, complex narrative that makes me real happy. And I don't even have a PhD in English literature, so I'm just an amateur.
All right.
So then we cut back. We cut back from this meeting of the Silk Spectres to this funeral of the comedian, and we get to see something from the viewpoint of Adrian Veidt. And we see a memory of his, and this is the Crime Busters 1968 meeting. And Veidt is Ozymandias. He's known as the smartest person in the world. That's like his bit, right?
Right.
And he wears gold and he wears gold and purple as well, right?
Right.
So he has a similar sort of color profile to, I'm not, golden era comedian, which I guess is what the Moore and Gibbon were doing. They were spoofing golden eras and stuff.
Right.
And so they have this meeting, and it's called by Captain Metropolis, whose name is Nelson Gardner. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Listen, there's a lot of problems in this world, and we can fix them, and we're going to fix them together." And the comedian basically says, he uses this word, he said, "This is bullshit. This whole idea stinks." And he says to Ozymandias, he says, "This is a joke. This is in town, this guy's in town, who cares? It doesn't mean squat, because within 30 years, the nukes are going to be flying like Maybugs."
He's highly cynical. Also, I did want to point one thing out. If you notice throughout this graphic novel, they don't use captions to very many captions, I should say, to describe things like a change in time. Now, the only way you get an indication that time has changed within this flashback again through Adrian's eyes is when someone calls out the Minutemen disbanding in 1949. Mm-hmm. So just look at that's just something that you guys just want to pay attention to. everything you're not going to be handheld throughout this novel. So you see a bunch of different. If you didn't already know, you would think that who are these people? That we're flashing back to.
It's brand new. Everybody's brand new except Captain Metropolis, who looks older, and the comedian looks totally different. You can't tell it's the comedian from the stuff you've seen before until you see his face.
Until you see his face, yeah.
Yeah, you can't tell. But it's but the Crime Busters. To introduce this group, it's a group that doesn't happen for, and we'll get into the rest of the meeting here. But it's Captain Metropolis, Ozymandias, the comedian Rorschach, Night Owl 2, the different Night Owl, Silk Spectre 2, and Dr. Manhattan, and the second most powerful member of the team, Dr. Manhattan's girlfriend. Because she can get Dr. Manhattan to do stuff, and Dr. Manhattan is very powerful. I'm just kidding about that, obviously. So, Jenny Slater does not have any superpowers, to be clear. Just one specific power that, that we'll find out about next issue.
But we do see him just eyeing.
Yeah.
Consistently eyeing Lori over there.
Right? And Lori's only 20. She's what? No, this is like 65, I think. So Lori's 16 years old. She's known to be like very young in this scene.
Right.
One thing that struck me about this scene is Rorschach talks in this scene.
Uh-huh.
And the lettering and the border of his vocal bubble is normal.
Right.
It's not like how he is in 85. Like, it doesn't have the jagged edges, and it's actually a sentence. Like, he says a sentence, you know what I mean?
Right.
So obviously there's something the intervening event that changes him between 65, 68, and I guess it's 65 and 85 over those 20 years.
Yeah, he didn't start out with his Batman Christian Bale gruffle voice and everything. No. Apparently.
He started out as Adam West Batman, and then he turned into Christian Bale Batman.
Oh man!
And this Batman here, this really smart Batman, is kind of like the Batman from the video games. That's Ozymandias. He's the video game Batman. He's got it all figured out. So the comedian says, this is an exercise in futility because everything is going to burn. And then he burns Nelson's Nelson has like a little like graph or a little infographic, and the comedian just sets it on fire and leaves and says, "This is dumb." Basically, right?
Yeah, probably pretty much saying what's on a lot of other people's minds and everything, and everybody just starts to leave.
And then everybody leaves, and then Captain Metropolis says, "Somebody has to do it, don't you see? Somebody has to save the world." And then we cut to from Veidt remembering this to the exact same position, the priest talking about the comedian, or saying the prayers of the burial prayers. And then we're treated to another little jump forward in time to fireworks and the victory party in the Vietnam War. Because
this was
Dr.
pretty
Manhattan remembers it. So this is Dr. Manhattan's memory. And this is different than any other memory that we see when it's Dr. Manhattan's.
Right.
Because Dr. Manhattan experiences time different than everybody else because he doesn't experience time. Like, he exists, like his consciousness exists outside of time, so he experiences everything all the time that he's ever done.
And all at one time. So
all at one time.
A human can't even imagine just experiencing everything all at one time. So that's what Scott's saying. Time means nothing to him because he's just experiencing everything all at once.
He can travel between different experiences and memories of his life. Like we go to work and we drive to school. And we go to I go to baseball games and things. So that's kind of how he does it. So his memory of the comedian that we share is the Vietnam War victory party in 1972 or 73. And Dr. Manhattan, so that's a big divergence, a huge divergence in the history, right?
Right.
Because we didn't get a victory party on our timeline. We didn't, it didn't go the right way, all the way. But Dr. Manhattan showed up. And, all we're seeing here is the victory party. So Nixon is on the helipad. President Nixon's definitely going to get his third term. And, Dr. Manhattan is saying, this is all a joke. What the comedian says, this is all a joke. And Dr. Manhattan says, how could you possibly think that?
Right.
The charged villagers, the boys with necklaces of human years, these are part of the joke. And the comedian goes, I didn't say it was a good joke.
He just says it was a joke, and you'll still see a little bit of Dr. Manhattan's humanity still in there because it's gradually he's gradually losing it over, a time. But when through a few of his speech bubbles, he's still showing empathy. In these early especially in this flashback. One thing you also want to notice too, this is the first time we see that smiley face, the ironic smiley face that's pretty much the symbol of this whole graphic novel here. So that'll come into play.
Absolutely. So this is the first appearance of that. Also, Eddie's got gray hair. He's got gray hair around his temples. And one thing I wanted to mention, I noticed this actually just today. And so, like I said, I've read this a bunch. I noticed something new today.
Okay.
In that Crime Busters meeting, he has a baton on his right hip, right?
Huh. Okay.
And obviously here, because of what's about to happen, he has a gun.
So
he's getting his violence is escalating.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a continuing escalation.
Wow, baton and then a actual gun on his right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was proud of myself for noticing that one.
Oh, that's good. Congratulations to you there.
Toot toot. So then, since the war is over, Eddie says, "I'm getting out of here as fast as I can." And the Vietnamese woman that he's impregnated comes in and says, "You can't just do that." And he says, "Watch me." And so she says, "I think you're going to remember us as long as you live." And she smashes a bottle and gouges his face, cuts him on the right side of his face. Slice in a sort of a diagonal motion in exactly the same place and manner that Silk Spectre 1 scratched him in 1940, which was the action that tipped him over the edge to deciding to assault her, is the way I'm going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, "You hurt my face," and then he shoots her. And Dr. Manhattan does not stop him.
Remember when we were talking about elements of humanity or empathy? This is a turning point for Dr. Manhattan.
So Dr. Manhattan is just sitting there and watches it happen. And Eddie Blake says, "You could have changed the gun into steam or the bullets into mercury or the bottle into snowflakes. You could have teleported either of us to goddamn Australia, but you didn't lift a finger." And then comedian says, "You're losing touch. You're losing touch, Doc. You're turning into a flake. God help us all." Because, and this is there's more detail on what happened in Vietnam, so I don't want to spoil it. But Eddie is right to be worried about Dr. Manhattan losing touch.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was pretty much one of the first ones to actually get the joke, and see it. So to have him actually realize it, maybe even before Dr. Manhattan does,
right,
is a pretty deep thing.
Yeah, so it's that his worldview, he does have some of that world, like that, to the comedian, what is a big deal is like nuclear holocaust, right? Everything under that is sort of like the comedian's like, what, none of that even matters. Because we have this overarching moral tragedy that's inevitable. So anything I do is sort of irrelevant. And so it's a joke.
Yeah.
So this is what he means by the joke.
And it's pretty disturbing what comedian just did here. He killed a pregnant woman.
You're right. Let's not discount, but not only a pregnant woman, but pregnant with his child.
Man, yeah. Yeah. Pretty brutal for her superhero comic, huh?
Exactly. And let's also unpack this. So he shot this woman, and when he says what he said about Dr. Manhattan, I am getting the impression that he thought Dr. Manhattan would stop him. So he did this because he figured, nothing bad could happen anyway. Doc's here. He's just going to, do with all, turn the bullets into mercury and nothing will happen.
Right.
And he doesn't. And he's just, and I think that's a little shocking to the comedian.
Right.
Because I think he's pinned, I think maybe the reason he's in Vietnam is he's pinned some of his hope that nuclear Armageddon won't happen on Dr. Manhattan's ability to tip the balance of power.
Right.
And Dr. Manhattan not intervening in this case is bad news for the community. It's bad news.
It's just bad news all around because it's the first sign of first sign of things to come regarding, just Dr. Manhattan's whole grip on humanity, on his humanity, period, and how he feels about it.
Exactly. And if he can't be bothered to save one life here, there's no guarantee he can be bothered to save 1 billion lives later. So that's what's terrifying to me about it.
Right. Probably to the comedian, too.
Yes, and the comedian, that's right, because the comedian sees, it's almost like he's talking about getting out of Vietnam, and he's almost talking about, he's almost optimistic talking about Nixon winning re-election,
right,
and talking about how things, could you imagine how bad it would be if we didn't win this war?
Right.
So he's talking like that, and then this event happens, and obviously his moral lapses, to use Rorschach's term. I don't know how you moral lapse away a cold-blooded murder, but it's almost like he thought he was playing bumper pool here, and he wasn't. So he doesn't think that his morality matters because Dr. Manhattan can just undo whatever he does. So that is, that's a big. I think that's a turning moment for Dr. Manhattan. You can tell again because he's standing in the same position here as he was in Vietnam, and remember he's experiencing this memory as he's standing there. He's not remembering it.
Right.
He's simultaneously living both realities.
Right.
So that's the thing about Dr. Manhattan is that he does whatever he wants. And then we are treated to our first actual scene of Night Owl 2 in action. So we've seen Dan Dreiberg in meetings, but we've not seen him in the suit being, you know what I mean?
Right. Actually,
being Gadget Batman.
Right. Exactly. doing his thing. He has a full owl mobile or ship or whatever.
Right.
And we see comedian in his mask, in his full mask, with
That's right.
With Night Owl controlling the ship.
So now it's 1977. And these are the Keene Act riots. There's police strike in New York City, and the people are rioting because it seems like the government won't get rid of these masked offenders. It's keeping the police from doing their job. And so the police say, and this is actually a quote from a newspaper on page 17 of this issue, cops say, let them do it. So nobody is coming to help anybody. And the Night Owl 2 and the comedian could sort of sweep in the ship, which is called Archie.
Right.
And they start saying disperse. And the comedian is wearing his leather armor. He's got his smiley face. He's got the leather mask because now his face has a big scar on it. So that's another, a further, obscuring himself, right? Mm-hmm. Further enhancing himself. He's now got guns, a baton, grenades, and it looks like maybe a grenade launcher that he says he's loading with rubber bullets.
He's in full G.I. Joe mode.
Yep. And then someone hits him with a can, and he says, "That's it." Starts throwing tear gas.
He was just waiting for the opportunity.
Yep. And then, he starts, they start going nuts. They said, we're protecting, Night Owl 2 says, protection from who? He says, from themselves. And Night Owl says, the country's disintegrating. What's happened to America? What's happened to the American dream? And the comedian says, it came true. You're looking at it.
One thing.
Which is.
Go ahead.
Which is quite an indictment of, the American dream, if that's true.
Exactly. And we also get someone, we get a bunch of people doing graffiti about who watches the Watchmen. Or actually, they didn't even finish it. It's just who watches the watch, So the bigger question of maybe even this whole graphic novel here, if these are so-called costume adventure heroes who are supposed to be protecting the people, as Night Owl asks, who watches them?
Right.
Who protects us from them? So I mean, it's a roundabout way of saying, okay, why do we need these superheroes? Because if they go out out of the rails or go off hand and just do some crazy stuff like Dr. Manhattan might possibly would, who watches them? Who controls them? Who protects us from them? Who watches the Watchmen?
They exist outside of civil liberties. They don't have due process, and their punishments are immediate and violent.
Exactly.
So they violate like 5 or 6 to do what they do. They violate 5 or 6 of the amendments in the Bill of Rights. You know what I mean? Like they have to. The legal search and seizure, all that stuff. So you can see how in a situation where there is no controlling mechanism, they can get out of hand.
It just escalated years and years and years all the way until 1977 when the Keene Acts started to take place. They had to put a mechanism in place in order to control these costume adventurers from doing that, from taking away people's civil liberties and stuff.
Yep. So they basically outlaw them here. This is the riot that results in the Keene Act, which outlaws mass vigilantism directly, except for certain approved mass adventurers. There's 2 of them. So
like the comedian,
like the comedian and his buddy,
right,
Dr. Manhattan. And so we're then treated to the end of the funeral. Dan flips the pin, the happy face pin that Rorschach bought him. He throws it in the grave. Mm-hmm. And then a man in a hat brings a bunch of roses, and Veet, Dan, and Dr. Manhattan all shake hands and go their separate ways. The Lord's Prayer plays as the man with the red hair and the end is nigh sign watches on.
There he goes again.
There he is again. He's Nevi.
Yeah. First we seen him, walking across comedian's blood at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now, he's just in it.
And we see him in a couple places across, in the streets in the last chapter, and now we see him here in the funeral. He's just everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He's ubiquitous. So the next scene is Moloch. So Rorschach pays Moloch a visit, and this is current. This is a current scene. This is happening in the real time, the same day as the comedian's funeral, but after.
Right.
Moloch comes home, makes himself some tea, maybe looking to get a little milk out and put a little milk in the tea, and then Rorschach pops out of his fridge and screaming, and he goes, "Ah!"
Oh, how did Rorschach fit in there like that? He just...
He's very patient.
Yes, I guess so, man. I hope he had the door cracked.
Right. Rorschach is not respectful for locks. He doesn't respect their ability to keep him out.
Well, no, I'm talking about the refrigerator.
Oh, the refrigerator.
He must have had it cracked on, so he could continue to live and everything. So, like Scott said, he comes busting out. Oh,
you're talking that way? Oh, man, I missed that. I'm so sorry, man. I'm being dense right now. I'm sorry, dude. Yeah, you'd have to leave it open. I was thinking you were talking maybe Moloch has one of those really funny novelty fridge alarms.
Right.
Every time you open it up, it oinks at you or something. And Rorschach's just making it go oink a bunch, and he's kind of laughing. I don't know. Rorschach wouldn't do that. He's not a mirthful person.
Not at all.
So first Moloch denies being Moloch, right? And then Rorschach says, no, it's definitely you.
Right.
And then he says, I heard you return. He says, you went to a funeral today. Why'd you go? And he's like, I don't even know. And then, Rorschach sort of threatens him a little bit more. he says, okay, he came a week ago. The comedian came to visit Moloch, right? And the comedian's visit with Moloch is terrifying because it's unbidden and it's in the middle of the night and he's crying. He's blubbering like a child.
Yeah, just rambling on
And on about all cleaning up the waterfronts and everything was a big joke, and then everything going on about he's like, you're involved in it, I'm involved in it. I never should have looked out that airship. All this random crazy stuff. And he says, I did terrible, terrible things. And then he says, oh mother, I did things in Nam, I shot kids. And he says, oh mother, forgive me. He's like, if I knew anything about this, I couldn't deal with it. He's terrified.
That this is pretty much at the point where comedian is just it's come to Jesus moment, I guess. He's come to terms on everything he's done in his life and everything, and it's come down to this, and he still can't believe what's about to happen is going to happen because it just blows his mind, and he realizes the joke of the situation is an actual reality. Yep.
And he says he's having this. I think the whole point of having us see all these terrible memories of him, right, is to tell us this guy's tough. He's a very tough guy,
right?
And he is knee-quakingly terrified,
right?
So there's he's just out of his mind, looking for opening his ex-enemy's sock drawer for booze.
Out of everything that he's been through, he's almost raped women. Probably, we don't see his whole life, but
thank goodness,
right. He's killed women with his child, his child and everything, and he's done all sorts of crazy stuff throughout his life, and then he comes to this point, and it's pretty much just rambling on to a villain. Moloch was a villain, right?
Yep, he was. And they're saying he's having this moral conundrum. After all this time, he's having a moral conundrum. He's saying what's happening. Something is happening that he's aware of that is unconscionable to him.
Right.
And his entire career, he has been known for having the most extreme methods and being the most extreme, violent, direct, mass adventurer.
The most cynical, too.
Yes, the whole time, most cynical. Like, I'll get mine, you get yours. It's all a joke. Blah blah blah. That's him. So that's that's kind of where we leave the comedian and we leave sort of the action of what's going on with him. Rorschach, Moloch tells...
Back up a little bit here because he says one thing in this on the page 23. He's like, old mother, forgive me. I mean, what's funny? What's so goddamn funny? I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. Somebody explain it to me. Come on now. That's a somebody has to explain to him the joke that he thought he was in on his whole life, pretty much, right?
Yep. He's saying this is much worse. What the thing he was talking about, which is thermonuclear war, which he's mentally prepared himself for. Mm-hmm. What he is afraid of something worse than that.
Right.
And he's a guy. This is a dude that just told Dr. Manhattan his business. I mean, and it's something that we'll come to understand about Dr. Manhattan is that that's a thing. That's something to do, and Eddie knows that it's a thing to do.
Right.
So him being this afraid is a intentional juxtaposition. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now Rorschach's still continuing to interrogate Moloch. He says, your story sounds unbelievable, so it's probably true. Because there's no way you just make that up on this
There's no way you can just make that up, so,
And then Rorschach, he says, come on, man, I'm clean. I was in prison, I'm out, I'm clean. And then he says, oh, yeah, well, I found some drugs. And he goes, drugs? What are you talking about? And it's like fake medicine made out of apricot pits for cancer. And he's like threatening to bust him for it. And he says, I'll let this one slide, but I'm going to report the company. He leaves. No.
You're so judgmental, Rorschach. I swear.
It's not just judgmental. Like, what's this guy gonna do? Like, you're gonna try to get him arrested. He's got how much time does he have left?
Exactly.
He says he has cancer. He's got the kind of cancer you die from. He's not selling this medicine. He's not purveying it to other people, right?
Not at all.
Like, he's the end consumer. The reason snake oil medicine is illegal is because it's harmful and because it gives people false hope, not because someone's eating apricot bits. That's not why it's bad.
Right. But Rorschach doesn't see it that way. It's either this or that.
It's either a crime or it isn't a crime. And if it's a crime, it's a crime.
Right.
And then Rorschach, on the night of October 16th, 1985,
in his journal,
he walks home through the red light district. He says he's been offered Swedish love and French love, but not American love. American love, like Coke and green glass bottles, they don't make it anymore. Which is just such a bleak thing to say. Then he goes to the comedian's grave to pay his respects to the comedian without fuss, is what he says.
Right.
And that's because he admires the comedian. And I think that's something that I did not pick up on the first couple times I read through this. Mm-hmm. He respects the comedian because he respects the comedian's methods. He shares the comedian's dim view of women. And so the violence against women, which is a big, should be a big problem for any superhero, any moralist anyway. Rorschach sees as less of a problem because he doesn't, he shares that sort of misogynistic worldview.
Well, comedian always shot it straight. So, I mean, that was one thing that Rorschach always admired about him, mm-hmm. when it was time to tell the truth. Yeah, and as we see how Rorschach sees the world, it's either this or that. He always appreciated, the simple way comedian just showed the truth about the world or told the mm-hmm. truth about the world. So mm-hmm. that was something that he definitely appreciated out of Edward Blake.
And then we see a sort of it's like a montage of the beating that killed the comedian, intercut with flashbacks of all the different memories we've seen of the comedian.
This page here is great. One thing I appreciate about it is the fact that it's not different as the final four panels, as far as like Scott said, the montage and everything. It's mm-hmm. different. It's the same artwork, but it's just in muted colors now. Mm-hmm. To show and to indicate it is a montage of the different time periods of the comedian's different points in the comedian's life and everything. When we see with the whoever kicked down the door to interrupt him, before his last minutes, him attempting to rape Sally Jupiter, mm-hmm. and then also him again being hit in his last days, and then also intercutting with his time with the Crime Busters and everything. And it also goes all the way until the very end where he was actually pushed out the window by whoever killed him.
Yep. It's the end of the comedian. And he was a complicated man. And then there's what does he say? So Rorschach tells the Pagliacci joke. It's a pretty famous one. I won't recount it because this is another thing the movie did pretty well. So if you want to hear a person read it, you can do that. But you should read I'll mangle the punchline. I'm not going to do it. So anyway, I'll say something for people that want to actually read. And then he says curtains, and that's just a red panel, right? It indicates the end. And it's almost like what's interesting about this panel, and again, we see more of this in a future issue, but this end here is sort of how Dr. Manhattan kind of experiences things, all at the same time, right?
Right.
The past, the present, and the future, all at once. That's how he sees it. And then Rorschach takes a rose and from the roses that Moloch brought and puts it in his lapel.
All right. And we one thing I'd also want to indicate about colors, and John Higgins, he was a colorist in this whole graphic novel. He transitions the colors all the way from regular from the cemetery and they just slowly develop into this red, which is on panel 27. The last panel is more red, especially the reddish on the comedian as he goes out the window.
Yep.
And it just goes all the way to the curtains where it's just all red, and then transitions into the rose, that Rorschach eventually puts on his lapel. So it's just amazing how they use the colors to further the story. Where, like me and Scott was saying, you really don't. Comic books back then, you really weren't. You were just using colors to enhance like the what people really look like, or what we thought superheroes were and what have you. But to really tell the story in colors, like how this graphic novel does, is just amazing. It's
like the difference, and I think that some of it is production scheduling for, they would have like two dudes would do a comic, it would take, they have one issue a month, right? So that has that time deadline thing is a crunch, and I think it's like the difference between I don't know, not to talk about this particular company in a negative way, but it's the difference between like McDonald's and like, a really like high-end steakhouse. Because like McDonald's, everybody can access it and it's good, and everyone knows like what it is and it's good and it's fine. But, the high-end steakhouse, you can't do it all the time.
Right.
But when you put the extra, when you do the extra resources, it's really a different experience.
Yep, it sure is. The chapter ends, and I'm up while the dawn is breaking. Even though my heart is aching, I should be drinking a toast to absent friends, which is what this chapter was called, instead of these comedians. Elvis Costello. Oh, man. Hey, yeah. Crazy.
And after this, there's a coda before issue 3, and it's basically the third chapter of Under the Hood, third and fourth chapters, which are, the chapter that recounts, the forming of the Minutemen and Hollis Mason becoming the Night Owl 1. Some of the commentary about, so the Minutemen are Hooded Justice, who we've discussed wears a noose and a hood. And he's a Nazi, kind of a Nazi. It's said that he expressed opinions of approval towards the Third Reich before Pearl Harbor. Is how Hollis Mason expressed that. He is dead, and he disappeared during the Red Scare. Captain Metropolis, or Nelson, also dead, right? Dead in a car accident. I don't know if he says that here, but he is, so I'll just spoil alert that for you.
Right.
Happened before the action of the show. It's not really something that's gone into in a lot of detail. Dollar Bill worked for the bank, who designed his costume for him, and his cape got stuck in a revolving door in 1947 and he got shot in point blank range.
It shows you the reality of what these heroes went through. It's something as little as your cape getting caught in a
yeah,
just caught like that, and all of a sudden that just ends your whole career and life.
Yeah, I mean, he said, Hollis says, Dollar Bill was like the nicest guy he ever met. Really missed Dollar Bill a lot. Said it was terrible. If he'd just designed his own costume, he says he'd still be alive. Is what he says. And then Night Owl's retired. He's the author of the book. There's Mothman, crazy. He's crazy. Silhouette was murdered by an ex-villain after her retirement, and I'll save the details on that for you guys to read on your own. And then the comedian, he says, the comedian was a bad apple, was a worm in the apple. Then he made a name for himself in the Pacific. One would assume through violence, as he is holding, I believe, in that picture that he's pictured at the end of this in the book, and he's got a few things he's looted from obviously dead Japanese soldiers, including a flag and a hat, and a few items from. You can only really get one way at that time. So, and that's who the Minutemen were.
And one thing Hollis, points out in this particular chapter, he's pretty much, I guess, justifying, their actions and everything, despite their flaws. I mean, which is really, something that they had. As he points out, Hooded Justice had the whole, Nazi thing going on. Captain Metropolis, he had gone on record making statements about Black and Hispanic Americans that were, viewed as like, really racially prejudiced and inflammatory. So he got caught on that. Some of the heroes had sexual hang-ups and stuff. That's something that you just don't hear about or read about, especially back then. As far as like, they're erotic hang-ups and stuff. Some were like unstable and just straight up crazy. And, he's just pretty much saying, okay, they had their flaws, but they were trying to do something or what they thought was good, before it just all got out of hand. And this is just, he's pretty much going throughout the, novel, or his particular novel within a novel, graphic novel within the novel within a graphic novel. Talking about his what he thought about the Minutemen, his perspective.
Yeah, he says they're all extreme personality types, and that's true. I mean,
pretty much.
Like we jokingly say about Batman all the time. Like you have to be a crazy person to want to do that.
Pretty much.
No normies don't do that.
Sociopathic.
Right. Yeah. It's just that. So that's kind of it's what it is. So that is essentially a recap. That's issue 2. Watchmen.
That is issue 2, guys.
Hooray.
Yeah. That was a very good chapter right there.
It was, and it really adds a lot of depth to the story. Right. Because the story now becomes, in chapter 1, it's almost like this close-in murder mystery. And then in chapter 2 expands it to a, we're globe-trotting power politics. The whole future history of this world is changed by by Dr. Manhattan, and that's just like a tangential, glance at all these things that he's done.
Yeah, it builds out the world pretty good, through the context of the different characters at a funeral. It builds out, everybody's experiences and perspectives of these main, characters. And it really does, Alan Moore and, Dave Gibbons do a really good job in conveying, and John Higgins. I don't want to keep not mentioning him, of telling this story, and we're only in the second chapter. Right.
All these characters have so much depth, and they've conveyed it so economically. They jump off the page at you. So that's one of the great things about this story. It's the more you look at it, the more it was so carefully put together that every single thing you find in it is an Easter egg, pretty much.
Yeah, and pretty much. Hopefully that you guys, find out the appreciate the complexities that came into putting this all together and everything. So as Scott said, we'll continue the next podcast talking about chapter 3.
Chapter 3 is an interesting chapter. It will be called "The Doctor Is Out." One question I have for you before we sign off and start doing the here's our names and stuff. This came to me today when I was reading through this chapter again before we did this.
Okay.
I got the inkling that Eddie Blake is the one who sent her that pornography. Do you think it's possible that Eddie Blake is the one who sent Silk Spectre that Tijuana Bible and who's been trying to buy her her memorabilia and stuff?
That's
as a
theory.
Continuing obsession.
That's a great theory there. They as we'll come to find out, it wasn't straight black and white with them too.
Right.
So we'll save some of that for the future podcast, but as Scott alluded to, you want to, if you have any comments and just want to just get some give us some feedback. Period. Email us at watching.watchmen and Nerdcyclopedia. Hit us up on Twitter at Watchmen Podcast. That's one, no T at the end. That's podcast with one S. And also Nerdcyclopedia at our regular, Twitter. And also you can hit us up on Facebook. We got a Facebook, group being put together. It's called Sam and Scott are Watching Watchmen. So,
how'd you come up with that title?
Name of the podcast. So yeah, just hit us up on Facebook as well and join our group. We love to get your feedback there as well. You got any other places you want to hit your stuff up at, Scott?
Right now, I think that's it. I mean, I'm good with the podcast stuff. I will say, we call our people nerd psychos. We'd love to have you as a nerd psycho. If you like what you hear, smash subscribe. Go ahead and rate us 5 stars.
Please do.
Our one rule is that it better be 5 stars or you get the business.
The business.
And if you don't know what the business is, let me tell you something. You don't want to know what the business is. It's the business.
See you when we see ya.
Yeah.